Hello guys. Thank you everyone for being today with us. And those who don't know Max, but I think we all know Max. Here he's presenting today about state of Solana's validator network, and he's representing Ultimate Money. We will have 1 hour for you, Max, to do the content and also take the conversation and do the Q&A. So let's make sure that he feels warmly welcomed. Thank you, Max.
Try and keep my eye on the clock there. Yeah, hey everybody, probably met most of you already, either around here or at the summer camp last year, or at some of the meetups we've organized with Ultimate. Yeah, for those that don't know me, I'm Max Sherwood. Sometimes I have to clarify I'm not the Max who co-founded Ultimate, that's Max Wallenberg. If you don't know Ultimate, it's a wallet on Solana, soon also Ethereum. Focused on DeFi, it's a self-custody wallet, so you can hold your private keys, hold your assets, and interact on-chain completely without the reliance on any centralized party, but with an experience that's hopefully so easy to use it feels like you're using a centralized exchange. That's the goal. On the side, I've started H2O Nodes with a friend of mine who's an IT expert. I sometimes tell people I'm not technical, but I guess I'm somewhat of an analyst, so this talk is really mostly featuring data and insights about the validator network, not so much about running a validator. So just kind of to introduce H2O Nodes, I guess it's a validator on Solana, regularly ranks in the top 10 on StakeWiz, which is a score of decentralization and performance. We've ranked as high as 3rd. I think that was a week or 2 weeks ago. You can see some information on validators.app. I'm always going to include the links for all of these bits of information that I show you, by the way. There's a lot of great websites out there. So of course, StakeWiz is from Lane, which is the rating website. So just in terms of background and context, I started Ultimate last year in the spring, and that was kind of my start on Solana as well. I've come from kind of the Bitcoin, Ethereum, traditional kind of crypto upbringing, if you will. About 10 years ago, I first kind of got into Bitcoin. So I had heard all of these things about Solana, oh, it's centralized, blah, 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 VC chain, all of these kind of things you hear. And when I started Ultimate, it was kind of my mission to do my own research, make my own opinions, and figure out what I thought about this network. And what I came away with was this blog post, Why Solana is More Decentralized Than You Think. So I was positively surprised with what I found, and I'll kind of get into why that is. But let's just say that Solana's validator network is actually one of its strengths. And I think I'll kind of explain why that is to you today. Of course, 2 weeks after I published my blog post, Solana Foundation published their first validator health report, so that was kind of a pat on the back. I think they said, hey, why haven't we published this information already? So that's what they did. This talk is not about the energy efficiency of validators, but I also just wanted to kind of throw out there that proof-of-stake networks are, of course, much more energy efficient than proof-of-work networks. Solana is one of the more power-intensive proof-of-stake networks, but it's also one that does the most transactions. So on a per-transaction basis especially, Solana is very energy efficient. You'll hear the Solana Foundation saying that it's carbon neutral. That's because they do some offsetting at the end of every year based on their estimates. I published a blog post in August for Ultimate called Proof of Stake Blockchains Are Part of a Green Future. And I took some issue with the way that the Solana Foundation was estimating their validator power consumption figures, and they amended those in their September report. They had, of course, already published a November and a March report up until that point. But yeah, if any of your friends or family have expressed concerns about buying an NFT because of Bitcoin mining. Those two things are totally unrelated. You can do whatever you want on Solana and generally not have to worry about the impact on the environment. So I know there's a mix of people in here, a lot of developers. Who feels like they have a good understanding of like proof of stake and validators already, just so I can kind of gauge my audience? A few people. Okay, so yeah, let's just start at the basics. Proof of stake is kind of the counterpart to proof of work. The first blockchains were proof of work, and the way that they allowed people to add transactions and blocks to the network was by performing a certain amount of computational work, such that it would be infeasible to essentially do fraud, because you'd have to do so much computational work and expend so much energy that just becomes economically infeasible to attack the network. It's not impossible, it's just, it doesn't make any sense economically. So proof of stake is kind of a twist on that. It requires you to not do work and expend energy, but it requires you to lock up tokens. So if you want to attack a proof of stake network, you can, but you have to accumulate a lot of the tokens of that network, which is usually economically infeasible. So Solana is a multi-billion-dollar blockchain. You can do the math, and that's kind of how we keep the network secure. So what are validators specifically? They're the machines that are doing computational work to check that new transactions are valid, and they're also nodes on the network. So they are communicating with every other node to share the information, update the state of the blockchain, and generally this is what we refer to as the Solana network, is this network of nodes and validators. Solana validators are a little bit controversial because they're a little bit different than validators on other chains. So on the left here we have an Intel NUC, which fits in the palm of your hand. This machine can be used to run an Ethereum validator, for example. You can use it at home quite easily, and that's kind of been the driving ethos of the Ethereum network. Make it as easy as possible for people to run validators at home. That will increase decentralization, it'll keep the network safe and censorship resistant, and that's kind of the design choices that Ethereum has always made. Bitcoin as well with their nodes. Solana is different because it said right from the beginning, we're going to go for performance, we're going to go for throughput, we're going to use the proof of history mechanism to push some computational load onto the validator machines. And as a result, the validator machines on Solana are very, very beefy computers. So we're talking 32 physical cores, probably 64 cores in total. We're talking over 500 gigabytes of RAM. I'll say that again, 500 gigabytes of RAM. And several terabytes of enterprise-grade SSD storage. So these are like, tens of thousands of dollars in terms of cost, and these are machines that run in data centers with multiple, 10 or 100 gigabit connections. So these are really enterprise-grade servers. This is not like at-home stuff, but this is how Solana is able to achieve, the performance that we all talk about. So that was a decision that was made right at the beginning. Obviously, it means people aren't going to be running these at home. They're going to need to run in data centers. They're going to need to be run by people with, IT experience. Just getting that out of the way, that's Solana. So given that, we want to achieve a certain decentralization of these validators. We want to achieve decentralization geographically in many geographic regions, across many hosting providers, or people running their own bare metal machines where they own their machines and they're not relying on hosting providers at all. We also want to see a good distribution of stake, meaning the tokens that are staked to validators. So why does decentralization matter? Going back down that same list, geographically, if you think about like natural disasters, knocking out infrastructure, if you have all your validators in a certain place and there's an earthquake or tsunami or something, you don't have any validators anymore and your blockchain is not running anymore. Likewise, geographic risk also brings regulatory risk. So if all of your validators are in the same regulatory region, you can see governments taking action to kind of hinder the activities of those validators. So, China has gone full anti-crypto. The US is looking worse every day. Hopefully here in Germany, things will stay friendly to validators, but you never know, so best to play it safe. Hosting providers, likewise, hosting providers can be friendly or not. Many of you probably heard about Hetzner in November, turning off about a fifth of the Solana validators in a single day. Thankfully, they didn't have a lot of stake, so the network continued to operate without a fault, but that was, I think, I think we learned a lot from that. The lesson, of course, being don't trust the hosting providers if you don't have to, or at least don't have too many validators on a single hosting provider. And lastly, of course, the staked token distribution. We'll get into this a bit later when we talk about the Nakamoto coefficient, but I'll just give you an example. So let's say that a network has 1,000 validators, but 99% of the tokens are staked to 2 of them. It's not a decentralized network, even though it has 1,000 validators, because the 2 top validators can basically collude to impact the network. So we want to see a good token distribution as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So yeah, let's dive into the data. Solana has 3,013 total nodes. This includes RPC nodes that are not validating, so the number of validating nodes is just above 2,000. Nakamoto coefficient of 30. There's validators, or nodes, I should say, in 31 countries, 204 cities, and 376 data centers. This is taken from Solana Compass, their decentralization dashboard. And you can see that the number of validators has actually grown over time very steadily. Even since kind of the FTX debacle, we haven't seen a drop in validators. We've actually really never seen a significant drop in validators on the Solana network, which is pretty impressive. I would attribute this to the support from the Solana Foundation with their server program, and also key players like Latitude who have offered very cheap hardware. So this is old data, but I think it's probably still going to be mostly accurate. So with 2,000 or 3,000 validators, Solana is solidly higher than most blockchains. I think Cardano also has around 2,000 validators. Avalanche, as you can see, has more than 1,000. But most networks that you're familiar with, most layer 1 blockchains are going to have, maybe a few hundred, if not under 100 validators. And this is usually by design, actually. So if you see a round number like 175 on Cosmos, 100 on Near, almost 100 on Polygon, that's because they've created an active set that's limited to a certain number. So if you are running a validator, running a node, it's online, it has tokens staked to it. If you are not, for example, the 100th biggest validator by tokens staked, you're not going to contribute to consensus, you're not going to be in the active set, and you're not going to earn anything for those tokens that are staked with you. So I really don't like that because it's, I guess technically they're permissionless networks, but if you need to have tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of tokens staked to your validator to contribute to consensus, it's not really, as permissionless as it could be, right? If we're talking about decentralization, running validators at home, that whole kind of ethos. So that's one thing that I really did like about Solana. That's kind of when I started to think more positive thoughts, realizing that you can spin up a validator, you can start staking with very few sold tokens, you can contribute to consensus if you have the right IT skills. So let's look at the network. We've talked about how many there are, now let's talk about where they are. You can see a big concentration in the US, especially the Northeast, a big concentration in Central Europe, a distinct lack of validators in South America, Africa, Australia, and other parts of Asia, which is not ideal. This is from solanabeach.io. So if we look at another view, this is from Solana Compass again. So we can see this is the US, different cities, different data centers, Germany, Netherlands, Ireland, Lithuania, France, Japan. So you can see a big US, Europe, tendency here. There is a bit of a long tail. So I would say this is decent. It could be better, it could be worse. If we look at ASN, so this is the hosting providers. So you can see TerraSwitch is a big piece there, OVH, Amazon. So these 3 hosting providers here make up like a third of the network. This is by stake, by the way. This is not by number. So yeah, this could be better. You'll notice that Hetzner is, it's on here somewhere, but it's very small. Hetzner used to be a big part of this. Like I said, they turned off all the Solana validators. So that was a big shift. If we compare this to Ethereum, just using Ethereum as kind of a yardstick, this is from Ether Nodes. So about a third of the nodes on Ethereum, not the validators, but the nodes, are on residential internet connections. So that's that green portion. And then pretty much the other 2/3 are on hosting providers. And in that blue portion, about 2/3 of that is on Amazon. You can see Hetzner's the second biggest one, but it's only 7%. So, if you multiply 2/3 by 2/3, 1/3 of the Ethereum nodes are on Amazon, which is not ideal. I don't think Amazon's going to threaten to turn those off or anything like that, but it's just not really something that you want to see a huge reliance on a single hosting provider. Coming back to Solana now, this is the stake distribution, so the tokens, you can see a very long tail here, so we're looking at 2,000 validators, but of course most of them have a small amount of tokens staked to them. This is kind of the, if you think about the top 30%, that's your Nakamoto coefficient, so that's your super minority. So we'll dive closer into these numbers soon. So Nakamoto coefficient, for those who aren't aware, is the top 33% of stake. How many validators are those tokens staked with? I'm not sure how old this data was, but at the time it was 31, so let's say 30 just for a round number. And of course, with 33% of the tokens, you can halt the network. With 66% of the tokens, you can actually basically do fraud and submit double sign transactions or things like that. So this is a pretty important number. I think Balaji is the one that coined the term the Nakamoto coefficient. It was not Satoshi, because obviously proof of stake did not exist when he wrote the Bitcoin white paper. So yeah, if we go to nakaflow.io, we can see the Nakamoto coefficient of a number of different protocols. Again, with 30 or 31, Solana is right at the top, leading the way. So you can see here, I would ignore this Ethereum one because Ethereum's kind of a unique case. But yeah, most major networks, I guess, have less than 10. So less than 10 validators control a third of the tokens, or I should say, stake a third of the tokens. Solana's Nakamoto coefficient has actually been increasing over time, pretty steadily. And this can change day to day because it's very easy to unstake and move tokens around on Solana. Of course, the Solana Foundation has a delegation program, and big investors probably stake their own tokens. So if you go to Solana Beach and you look at the biggest validators in that top 30, a number of them are anonymous. They're just addresses. They're not like professional businesses that have names. So this is kind of an interesting thing to see with your own eyes because we say Solana has 2,000 validators. It does, that's true, but of course the stake of tokens, so the stake weight is an extreme long tail distribution. So I think the orange is probably the super minority. So let's just go to a logarithmic view so we can actually kind of see better. So on the y-axis now we have 10,000, 100,000 million. That's Solana staked per validator. So you can see that the majority of validators have less than 100,000 SOL tokens staked to them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but this is kind of what keeps me up at night, if anything, about the Solana network is thinking about its economic robustness. Not necessarily. I think it's very robust in terms of it's not completely relying on a single hosting provider or a single country. I think all of those pieces of data were pretty reasonable. This is the part that especially after FTX, when the price of SOL token went below $10, this was the part where I was really scratching my head, thinking, okay, how many of the validators in the validator set are operating at a loss? Because there are very real costs to operating a Solana validator. This is a tool from cogencrypto.io, attributions down here at the bottom. And basically what I've done here is I've just put in a $500 per month cost for servers. I put in 5% commission and 0 SOL self-stake, and I put in 125,000 SOL delegated stake. I don't actually know if the price of SOL is still $23, but that's what it was when I did this analysis. I think it was a week ago. And basically your net income comes to 0, right? So we can say that you need 125,000 SOL staked to a 5% commission validator if you're spending $500 a month on servers to break even. So if we kind of use that 125,000 SOL break even point, as a yardstick, we can see that, obviously the majority of Solana validators are operating at break even or at a loss. So the network is probably less economically robust than it is technically robust. And this is kind of the debate that I've been encouraging people to have is like, do we want a Solana network with a large number of potentially unprofitable validators, or do we want a smaller number of more economically robust validators? So I think this really came to like the top of my mind during the most recent network outage, because we waited 8 hours for the network to come back online. And what happens during those 8 hours is you're waiting for 80% of the stake to signal their readiness to restart at a certain block. And it took 8 hours because it was during the nighttime here in Europe and during the late evening in the US. So basically, a lot of the validators are run by single individuals who sleep at night, and if they're asleep, they cannot signal readiness to restart the network. So you usually have to wait 8 hours for them to wake up if it's nighttime in Europe. So I mean, an ideal Solana validator is a business with people that are awake 24/7, on call, can wake up in the middle of the night to do stuff like restarts. But obviously, if you're doing this by yourself as a side gig, not earning any money, like I am with my partner, it doesn't really economically make sense for you to wake up in the middle of the night to restart your validator when you have a small amount of stake. So I'm not advocating for anything in particular. I'm not like putting forward any kind of suggestions here. I'm just encouraging people to think that maybe a higher number of validators doesn't always mean a more robust network in total. And I think Marinade kind of came to this conclusion a lot earlier than I did. They actually published this in July of last year. They used to say, oh, it's our goal to have 10,000 validators on Solana. And that was like one of their North Stars. And when the SOL price was at $200, maybe that was more realistic. But they kind of realized that it's economically infeasible to support 10,000 validators. Currently, Marinade, not to pick on Marinade, but they're the biggest liquid staking pool on Solana. They have 6.5 million SOL tokens in their pool. So if we use that 125K SOL break-even point, that means they can only support 50 validators to break even currently. So there's some real kind of like economic realities that we have to grapple with as well. And that's kind of what preoccupies me most of the time. I'm very interested in liquid staking, etc. And yeah, crypto is this kind of unique Venn diagram of like tech, economics, and like the social layer as well. So that's pretty much all I have. I don't want to end on a bad note. Definitely, I think most of the kind of concerns and critics of the Solana network are unwarranted, I would say. I think once you get over the fact that these are high-performance machines in data centers run by IT professionals, if you can be okay with the fact that they're not being run from home, then you can say, yes, we do have good geographic decentralization, we do have good hosting provider decentralization, and we're right up there with chains like Ethereum, chains like Avalanche, and in fact better than most chains. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it there, open it up to questions, and let me know if there's any slides you want to see again. Questions, comments, reactions?
Is the technical necessity going to stay the same over time? So when computer hardware becomes cheaper, the break-even point is reached earlier?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's kind of two parts to the question. Will it become less technically challenging going into the future? I think no. I think, in fact, one of the design principles of Solana is by pushing that computation onto the validators, as hardware improves, the whole network will become higher throughput and the whole network will improve. And we're now seeing the new AMD chips kind of being released to market, so we'll see if that, once validators adopt new hardware, will we actually see the network get faster? The second part of the question, I guess, is will it be cheaper? And will that change kind of this economic mechanism, or thing that I presented? I don't think so, because I mean, I'm not sure yet. Like, Solana's only been around for two and a half years. But I think if you're running older hardware, cheaper hardware, more outdated hardware, it's going to be harder for you to vote, basically, and you're going to earn less APY for your stakers. So I think you pretty much always will need to run, like, maybe not the latest hardware, but like reasonably expensive hardware to stay performant. That's a good question, though.
Thanks.
Curious about your own personal motivation to start a validator when it's probably not economically paying off at the moment, and also like how you see that influencing the general landscape, as you were just saying. If most validators have to operate at a loss, like you do that for the ideal of decentralization, or that's personal motivation.
Yeah. So the question is like, why do you do this if it doesn't make any money? And indeed, why do most validators do this if it doesn't make any money? Yeah, I mean, I've run Bitcoin nodes for many years. I was never kind of technically capable myself to run an Ethereum node, but basically it was just like a good partnership with an ex-colleague who's an IT professional, basically, who said like, hey, I like this staking stuff, it's new, I'm keen to learn more. He's been doing IT and DevOps since like the early 2000s. He's a bit older than me, and I've been kind of immersing myself in crypto since maybe 2013. So it's kind of a good partnership, meeting in the middle, learning about each other's industries. And yeah, I think economically, in terms of like making money, the way I think about a lot of crypto businesses right now is like, obviously it's the bear market. Crypto always happens in cycles. It's always happened like that so far. And you don't, you need to like do the work before the cycle, right? You need to like build up, infrastructure, businesses, products, whatever it is you're working on, so that you're in the right place and you're positioned correctly for when that next big wave happens. Also for us as a validator, like we were looking, we had the skills and the knowledge, but it was like, what network do we start on? And like I said before, we looked at Near, we looked at, Polygon, we looked at other networks, and we just wouldn't be able to start validating on those networks without, a lot of tokens delegated. So Solana is actually one of the few networks where you can just go start. I mean, you might be burning money in the beginning. Our particular path was getting some delegation from Lido, and that's kind of how we reached enough to break even. But yeah, like I said, Solana, that's kind of how I started changing my mind about Solana, was realizing like, wow, if you want to go start a validator business, you pretty much can't unless you have connections to big investors or big token holders on a lot of other networks. So, and in terms of why do all of the others keep doing it, I mean, I can only speak from kind of anecdotal evidence. I was in Breakpoint meeting a lot of these guys, and I expected them to be multi-chain, just like running on multiple chains, just kind of doing whatever is profitable. But a lot of them were only on Solana. A lot of them started on Solana. A lot of them were even into crypto before Solana. So it's definitely a community. Some of them tend to be like not very out in the open. You don't see a lot of them like on Twitter or giving talks or whatever. But I think it is, it's a community just like other communities on Solana, even if it's a bit different. And I don't know if they do it for the ideal or to prepare for the next cycle or whatever it is. But yeah, these are very smart, very capable people. And I was expecting to see like a drop here after FTX, with $10 sold, like I really was. And we've seen it go up. So I also can't explain it. I mean, I'm happy. I'm glad that the health of the network isn't in question. But I don't think that it should take like volunteers to secure that network either. So
yeah. One question. So you said only like 50 individuals or 50 companies could run the network, the blockchain is profitable, or the validator is profitable, and what could be an approach to change it? Because if we look at the diagram where the line was with profitable and unprofitable, so if the cost or for validation or the income for validators would be only significantly higher, then many of them would become profitable. Would this be a measure to achieve more people to validate?
Yeah, so just to clarify, this was 50 validators that Marinade could support. So the total token supply for Solana is like 300 or 400 million SOL tokens. So like, let's say roughly an order of magnitude higher than that. Sorry, 2 orders of magnitude. So yeah, so I mean the Solana network could support the current number of validators that it has, like 2,000 validators, profitably, if token distribution was completely equal across all the validators. So if this was completely flat at this red line, then they'd all be breaking even. So, but the problem is that it's so skewed towards, you know, the validators with a lot of stake that there's not enough stake for the rest of them. Hopefully that makes sense. So there could be 2,000 validators on Solana right now, like just breaking even, not earning any money. And then what was the second part of the question?
The second part was like, if validators get more money for what they do, the red line could go down a little bit so that not only the peak is profitable, because there is almost a horizontal line of organizations or individuals that could be profitable if this red line would go below, I guess it's a little bit below 100,000.
Yeah, so the question is like, how do we make it so that having 100,000 SOL staked makes you profitable, because then all of these validators, you know, more than half would be profitable, right? So yeah, the economics of this, it depends on your costs. So your server costs, I think $500 a month is a little bit more than the cheapest servers offered from Latitude.sh right now. I think they're down to like just under 400. And also the 5% commission. So I would say this is industry standard. So this is the percent of the new staking rewards that you keep for yourself as a validator. So, you know, if you doubled that to 10%, obviously like the whole economics would change, right? And also the price of SOL matters a lot, right? That's probably the biggest single variable. So if you go in here, you type in $200 SOL, it looks very different. So this is kind of me assuming that, you know, the bear market's going to last a little while longer. SOL's going to stay around $20, $30 for another few months or you know, years even. But yeah, last year, like I haven't even run the analysis for $200 SOL, but I'm assuming last year almost all the validators were profitable and probably making a healthy profit as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I think that's another reason why we haven't seen a dip here, because, you know, if you think about the fact that, let's say, like 1,500 validators have been active throughout, like at the end of the bull market, there were, you know, a lot of validators who probably had made a decent amount of money, so they were able to run for, you know, a year and just break even or lose a little bit of money and not really have that be like breaking their business completely, right? I'm in a unique case because I basically started this in the bear market and was looking to bootstrap it. But I think if you've been through a huge cycle and you have some, you know, savings as a company, probably you're fine to run unprofitably for many months, right? So that's probably another aspect. All right, I think I'll leave it there. Yeah, I'll be around, so happy to talk, and thanks for your attention.